Good morning, this is Chris.
And Brian.
Reading the Society News for Friday the 8th of September. On Tuesday, the strollers will be meeting this Tuesday the 12th of September. The minibus will leave Millbrook House at approximately 9 o'clock and, after picking up strollers, will go to Bartlett's Farm Cafe for coffee between 10:30 and 10:45. After coffee, the group will go to the junction of Coach Lane and Doctors Lane for a stroll, which will take approximately 20 minutes. Lunch will be at the Bugle, Brading, for 12:15. The next session of introducing Millbrook House will take place on Tuesday the 12th of September. This is a chance for anybody to come along and discover what is available in terms of equipment or services to visually impaired people. Introducing Millbrook House is open to everyone who would like to find out more about what is available. The session runs from 10:30 till 12 p.m. The Dolphins group will be meeting to swim on Tuesday the 12th of September at the Waterside Pool Ride. The pool is closed to the public during the session. If you would like to go swimming, please call the Society first to advise us of your level of swimming ability. Please note, lifeguards are in attendance during this session. Wednesday. The weekly coffee morning will be held as usual to support the Society this Wednesday, the 13th of September. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea as well as a piece of cake. The Owls will be meeting on Wednesday, the 13th of September at 2 p.m. in Millbrook House. The speaker for this week's meeting will be talking about the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake. For information on forthcoming speakers, please visit the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind website www.iwsb.org.uk. We are inviting the Society service users to a user forum on Wednesday the 13th of September from 12 noon until 1 p.m. This will be held at Millbrook House. If you are interested in attending, please RSVP by Monday the 11th of September by calling 522-205. Thursday. The Knitters and Natterers are meeting on Thursday the 14th of September at Millbrook House. The group runs from 10:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. You can knit or just natter. Then later in the afternoon, volunteers will come in and read to the group from different topics. Friday. We will be holding a bucket collection in aid of the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind on Friday the 15th of September from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. at Morrison's Supermarket in Newport. Any other news? Please note, transport may be available to some of the groups, but please call the Society first on 522-205. For information only, the next Striders group will take place on Friday the 22nd of September. This date is a week earlier than usual, but is correct and is not an error.
Scaffolding news. Known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding or hoarding are as follows. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Bay area. Current scaffolds. Lloyds Bank, Regent Street, Shanklin. Scaffolding is due up from the 18th of September at the Carlton Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown. Ventnor area. Current scaffolds. Cliff View, Hamborough Road, Ventnor. Scaffolding is due up from the 18th of September at 36 Victoria Street, Ventnor. Cowes area. Current scaffolds. Development site Castle Street, East Cowes. Jam and Sons, Thetis Road, Cowes. Watson, Bull and Porter, 8 Ferry Road, East Cowes. Amory House, 4 to 6 Terminus Road, Cowes. Moira House, Sun Hill, Cowes. Current hoardings, 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes. 93 High Street, Cowes. Scaffolding is due up on the 11th of September at 4 Alfred Street, East Cowes, and the 12th September at 27 Cross Street, Cowes. Newport area. Current scaffolds. Nippert Court, West Street, Newport. 2 Chapel Street, Newport. 38 Key Street, Newport. 10 to 12 Lugley Street, Newport. 47 Key Street, Newport. Cranbourne Rest, 61 St James Street, Newport. 67 Trafalgar Road, Newport. 47 Moor View, Godshill. Scaffolding is due up on the 14th of September at 43 Lugley Street, Newport. Also, scaffolding is due up imminently outside Mia, 20 St Thomas's Square, Newport. Dates are to be confirmed. Ryde area. Current scaffolds. St Mary's Church Ryde along St Mary's Passage. Oasis Dental Care, 9 Melville Street, Ryde. 77 George Street, Ryde. So and So, 30 to 31A Union Street, Ryde. British Heart Foundation, 19 High Street, Ryde. Sea Hill House, Pier Road, Sea View. Scaffolding is due up on the 11th of September at the Old Bakery, Bullring, Brading, and the 18th of September at Angel's Grace, 71 Union Street, Ryde. West Wight area. Current scaffolds. Cornerways, the Broadway, Totland. Scaffolding is due up on the 13th of September at Mulberries, High Street, Yarmouth. This week's In Touch. In this week's episode, the Macular Society's CEO, Kathy Yelf, explains the significance of the new CVI, or Certificate of Vision Impairment, which has recently been introduced to simplify the registration process and to provide people better access to services and benefits. Listener David Small is upset that the RNIB plans to sell the box that they have had at the Royal Albert Hall for over 100 years and which offers blind and partially sighted people reduced tickets to concerts. Author Red Sell presents his latest column on holidaying with little or no sight.
And now for the Isle of Wight County Press for Friday the 8th of September. Island couple in eye of hurricane. Stranded as Irma wreaks havoc in the Caribbean. A young island couple living on one of the Caribbean islands hit by the full force of Hurricane Irma have been able to reassure family and friends at home that they are safe. Sarah Clutterbuck and Josh Strickland are on the British Virgin Island of Tortola, which was hit by 185 mph winds on Wednesday as Category 5 Irma passed directly overhead. There's roofs flying through the sky and boats upside down on the top of the other boats, and we still have Wi-Fi, said Sarah, in a series of text messages home to her parents in Knighton. It's scary and loud, lots of bangs, and the floor keeps shaking and shuddering, but we think the worst is over now. It's gradually getting quieter, she wrote. The last contact came at about 10 p.m. on Wednesday, when Sarah was able to phone her father Stephen and tell him the roof of the hotel they had been evacuated to had been wrecked, but they were still safe. People from the top floor of the 3-story building were now sheltering on the floor below with them, and there was water coming through into their room, but they were still in good spirits. The couple, who worked for a yacht charter company, had left their boat on Tuesday night and, with dozens of other crews and guests, were evacuated into the hotel on high ground above the harbour. In a Wednesday afternoon phone call to her mum, Jane, Sarah said they had seen the eye of the storm go directly over them. The howling winds briefly abated and the sky was weirdly blue, she said. The most frightening time came several hours later, when the terrifyingly noisy wind was at its height, causing the building to shake and shudder. They had been advised to hunker down in the bathroom when the storm was at its peak, and they tried to drown the noise by watching DVDs. The last 2 hours have just been scary, really, was her understated text home. Sarah, 26, a former Medina High School pupil, and Josh, 29, a former instructor at UKSA in Cowes, went to Tortola in March, leaving their home in Gurnard. They had been preparing for the arrival of Irma for several days, helping to move yachts in what was hoped to be a safe place and getting emergency supplies. Typically of Sarah, she had prepared several days' worth of healthy meals, but made sure she also had a good stash of chocolate, said her mum. When we spoke to them, they were very cheerful and matter-of-fact about it all, but I think she was putting on a good show to stop me worrying. She said they could see massive, shocking devastation outside, and it looked as though many of the boats had been destroyed. The couple are due home to the Isle of Wight next month for a holiday.
Neonatal unit closures, reassurance to mothers. Critically ill babies are being transferred to the mainland after intense pressures have forced the island's premature baby unit to close its doors on a number of occasions, it has been revealed. The neonatal intensive care unit at St Mary's Hospital has temporarily closed to new patients 3 times this year, with the most recent incident in August, and it closed 8 times last year, it was revealed at Wednesday's IWNHS Trust Board meeting. Staff sickness and high demand have led to some mothers being transferred to Southampton by ambulance and air ambulance, depending on the circumstances. The Barely Born Fund saw islanders raise thousands of pounds towards the specialist unit, which opened in 2011. Interim Chief Executive Maggie Oldham said the service had peaks and troughs, and temporary closures were common in the NHS. We can protect the immediate safety of anyone just turning up who is not aware we've got an issue, or the deterioration of a patient internally, but what we wouldn't want to do is sustain that for a longer period, she said. When asked if the unit could close permanently, Miss Oldham said, "That's a question that would be very wrong of me to try to answer now, because that's under such intense scrutiny from the Systems Transformation Programme, and across the country we're looking at all these issues." We don't want to alarm people, because there will be women about to give birth who will be frightened to death by any headline on that. Charles Godden, the Trust's new Associate Non-Executive Director, who's worked with neonatal units in the past, said temporarily closing the unit must be a nightmare. It should be the last resort, particularly on an island. 8 closures seems like an awful lot, but it's important to remind the public it never totally closes. It reduces activity and transfers people as required. If a baby has to be brought in and resuscitated, then you've not shut the doors on them.
Floating bridge prompts complaints to watchdog. More than 400 people have signed formal complaints about the floating bridge, according to campaigners. The figure was revealed after the Isle of Wight Council said it was pulling the £3.2 million vessel out of service indefinitely due to ongoing problems. Most of the complaints have come from East Cowes businesses, which estimate they have lost a total of £250,000 this year due to issues with the floating bridge. The complaints have been submitted as a group complaint to the local government ombudsman, with individual testimonies by East Cowes community organisers. One of the lead community organisers, Cameron Palin, said, "Thousands of people on the Isle of Wight are devastated. This floating bridge is unreliable, infrequent and not fit for purpose overall. We need the local government ombudsman to investigate the situation and help the council establish where things went so wrong." Owner of East Cowes business Value for You, Angie Booth, said, "Business customers aren't using the bridge because they can't count on it. That's destroyed my shop, and all of our businesses' turnovers are down 10 to 44%. Who can survive when you haven't been able to pay yourself since January? The launch needs to be full-time so our customers will come across, but also so carers, cleaners, GKN workers, school children, teachers and so many others can get where they need to go and on time." Local councillor Carl Love is also demanding answers. He said he only learned of the decision to take the floating bridge out of service after he was contacted by the county press for a comment. "I believe East Cowes could be at the centre of regeneration on the island. There are wonderful opportunities here, but this is bringing us down and down," he said.
Allegations about closure. Last week's decision to pull the floating bridge from service has led to allegations of a smokescreen from former scrutiny chairman Councillor Jeff Brodie. On Thursday, Isle of Wight Council leader Councillor Dave Stewart said after discussions with officers and senior councillors he had decided to suspend the service until issues surrounding it were resolved. There was no delegated decision notice or cabinet meeting discussion. Councillor Brodie said after questioning the decision-making process, he was told by the council's legal officer the decision to suspend was actually taken by officers after consultation with members. Councillor Brodie said scrutiny members had been misled and accused the Conservative leadership of wanting to avoid accountability. It is clear officers are covering for a political decision, so it does not get called in to the scrutiny committee. The leader seemed to be pleased as punch to announce the floating bridge closure as his decision last Thursday, but they then realised that it would make it subject to scrutiny. Sadly, this is an example of senior officers being used as a smokescreen to remove accountability for such a major decision. I've also asked the scrutiny chair to put this sleight of hand on the agenda for next week's committee meeting, he said. Councillor Stewart said he and the Council Chief Executive John Metcalfe had concluded the floating bridge needed to come out of service after Councillor Stewart discussed the issue with a Cabinet Member for Transport, Councillor Ian Ward, and other Cabinet colleagues.
Previous bridge for sale. The old floating bridge is up for sale. The vessel, which was replaced earlier this year, is on the market for £125,000. It is currently moored in Portsmouth and listed for sale on the Apollo Duck website. The new floating bridge has been taken out of service indefinitely by the Isle of Wight Council after a catalogue of problems. Although residents have suggested bringing the old bridge back to fill the void, the slipways have been adapted to suit the new model.
Private briefing on fixed link arguments. It is one of the biggest talking points on the island, the possibility of a fixed link to the mainland. However, both the press and public were excluded from an important briefing at County Hall when Isle of Wight councillors heard the arguments both for and against a possible Solent tunnel. 28 members took up an open invitation to all councillors to attend an informal meeting of the full council on Monday night. The county press also sent a reporter, but she was told to leave and escorted from the building. Asked afterwards why the proceedings were conducted in secret, a council spokesperson said it was an informal information session for council members and so not open to the press and public. Councillors heard both sides of the fixed link debate, including calls for a feasibility study. Each side left the room while the other gave their presentation and answered councillors' questions. Island MP Bob Seeley was present during both presentations via Skype. Carl Feeney, who has spearheaded the Pro-Link campaign, told the county press, "I asked for the sides to be kept separate, otherwise it would have just got messy. We don't want problems such as the anti-link campaign pulling apart our campaign and misrepresenting us." He added he believed the arguments for a study were well received. Angela Hewitt, who represented the anti-fixed link campaign, said, "I think the whole suggestion is just a frivolous use of money. I got very passionate and think I might have upset a few of the councillors. I got some applause from several councillors at the end of my speech," she added.
Morris serenades a Sandown pork pie. Inspiration comes from the most unusual sources, even pork pies. Avid pork pie fan Joe Hodgson, 95, was so enamoured by the quality of a particular pie from Sandown, his friend Maurice Bentley, 91, wrote a song in honour of the meaty treat. Joe, previously of Lake, has since moved to Blackwater Mill Care Home, but Maurice makes regular visits and always takes a pie with him. Maurice from Sandown has been penning ditties since 1942, but it's the first time a pie has served as his muse. He said, "I've been writing tunes all my life, odd situations and personalised things like this." Kevin and Janet Griffiths of Wilkinson's Classic Pies in the High Street, Sandown, created the pie and were delighted when they first heard the song. "It brings a tear to the eye, really," said Kevin. "We've never had anything like that before, and this lovely old gentleman walked in to sing the song for us. It's lovely. It restores your faith in the human race." Although the pair have now sold the business after 3 years at the helm, they're leaving on a high note, thanks to the song. The pork pie recipe has been passed on to the new owners. Morris said, I think what surprised them was that in the business of catering, you never get anyone who's quite mad enough to do anything like that. So it's a bit of a tribute to them and their expertise.
Mikey was loved by everyone. The driver of the car who died in a crash on Sunday night has been named by police as 20-year-old Mikey Mason. Tribute was paid to the former Cowes High School student of Lane End Road, Bembridge, who died following a two-car collision on the Downs Road near the Brading Viewpoint car park just after 9 p.m. In a statement issued by police, his family said, "Our boy Mikey was loved by everyone who met him. He would light up the room. A loving son, brother, grandson, nephew, cousin, boyfriend and friend to many, he will be sadly missed, but forever in our hearts and memories." Mr. Mason was driving a grey MG. The other car was a blue Peugeot 207. Police say investigations into the exact circumstances of the collision are ongoing.
Popular pub to be reopened by couple. A much-loved Ventnor pub is preparing to reopen its doors after closing suddenly in January. The Volunteer in Victoria Street has been taken over by husband and wife team Graham and Susan Perks, who have run pubs in the town for 30 years. The pub will be enjoying a soft launch next weekend, with refurbishment planned for a few months after. The Volunteer will return with a wide selection of real ales, plus a small kitchen that will offer classic pub snacks. Graham said, "I took it over because it has always been a good pub in the town. We'll take it on and keep it much the same as it's been, just a backstreet local pub. We're looking forward to making it a community pub."
Dragonflies inspired sailor. After 11 weeks sailing across the Atlantic, Adam Pereira arrived home in Cowes on Monday. Adam has sailed 7,000 nautical miles from Cowes to New York and back and raised more than £700 for Diabetes UK. Having dropped anchor off Liberty Island on August the 5th, the Royal London Yacht Club sounded the horn less than a month later to herald Adam's return to the island. The 33-year-old from Ventnor has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. He said, "This is by far the longest distance I've ever covered in a boat and the toughest thing I've ever done. At one point, in a storm 200 miles off East Cowes, I was in a bad place mentally and 2 dragonflies suddenly came out of nowhere. As unbelievable as it seems, these delicate insects gave me the strength to continue. By doing this challenge, I want to inspire people who have diabetes to follow their dreams and not let their condition stand in their way." Regional fundraiser for Diabetes UK, Charlotte Harrison Webb, said, "Adam's story is incredible. He battled through some very tough conditions, and we are all very proud of him." You can sponsor Adam at www.justgiving.com, fundraising Adam-Pereira.
Farmers appeal to dog walkers. A farmer whose sheep were savagely mauled has urged dog walkers to keep their pets on a lead. 5 of Todd Carter's sheep were attacked as they grazed in a field next to Motterston Manor. They were bitten so badly on the back of the neck they could not lift their heads from the floor. One suffered such a severe injury it had to be shot the following day. The others were attended by a vet who stitched their wounds. Police are investigating the incident, together with similar attacks in the West Wight during the summer. The injured sheep were found by a gardener at Mottiston Manor, who raised the alarm. Livestock farmer and Isle of Wight Hunt chairman Mr. Carder, 58, of Chapel Furlong Farm, Hulverston, said, "I saw one of the sheep with its nose on the floor, bitten on the back of the neck, then another and another. Their heads were hanging forward. It must have been a big dog to bite the back of the neck. Nothing else could attack a sheep like that." 1 month after the incident, on July the 26th, another of Mr. Carder's sheep was similarly mauled and died from its injuries. "It's not that rare for dogs to attack sheep, but it's not usually this bad," said Mr. Carder. "I can't believe a dog walker wouldn't notice their dog attacking 5 sheep. In the past, people have just walked off and left them. It's not nice to find your animals like that." The area next to the Mottiston Manor car park is popular with dog walkers. Mr. Carder urged people to keep a close eye on their dogs and keep them on a lead around livestock. Anyone with information about the attack can call police on 101.
School archives get human touch. Living history has been added to Ryde Academy's archive as the school readies itself for the demolition of its old buildings. More than 150 former students and staff of the academy, formerly known as Ryde High, and before that Wight County Secondary Modern and Upper Grade, visited for a last look round the building before the demolition process starts. A school spokesman said, "We were impressed and touched by how many people came, including some from the mainland. Their stories have added a human touch to our archives and history project, started by some of our Year 10 students. It was lovely to hear how fondly people remembered their time here, and interesting to find out what they eventually did with their lives in terms of careers and experiences. Lots of them came along with groups of friends as well as their families and were able to catch up with people they'd been to school with. Photographs were taken, stories swapped, and the possible location identified of the time capsule said to have been buried in the 1960s. Memories and mementos of the old buildings collected from some individuals, Ryde Social Heritage Group, the Ryde District Heritage Centre and the Isle of Wight Record Office will be published on the Academy website and in its archive as the school prepares to move into its new complex on November the 6th.
Ireland was refuge for kidnap victim. Stephanie Slater, the Birmingham estate agent who made a new life for herself on the island after her horrific kidnapping ordeal at the hands of killer Michael Sams, has died. She died last Thursday, aged 50, just days after she was diagnosed with cancer. Stephanie's abduction in 1992, when she was 25, shocked the nation and sparked one of the biggest manhunts in British criminal history. Posing as a potential buyer at a house in Great Bar, Birmingham, convicted killer Sams bound and gagged Stephanie at knife point, drove her to his workshop and imprisoned her in a coffin-like box. She was told she would be electrocuted if she moved. Although Sams denied sexually assaulting her, Stephanie said she was raped. She was freed 8 days later after her employer, the Shipways Estate Agency, paid a ransom of £175,000. Sams, from Yorkshire, was jailed for life for kidnapping Stephanie and murdering Leeds teenager Julie Dart, whom he had abducted and killed in a botched ransom attempt the previous year. Following the ordeal, Stephanie sought refuge on the island with her friend Stacey Kettner. She had happy memories of visiting as a child and would later say the memory of a picture of Christ at God's Hill Church, which made such an impression on her, kept her going during her ordeal. She changed her name to Phoenix Rhiannon and wrote a book, Beyond Fear, My Will to Survive. She also gave talks to help the police understand the perspective of violence and sexual assault victims. She also worked as a tour guide at St. Catherine's Lighthouse. Following her death, ITV journalist Keith Wilkinson, who made a documentary with Stephanie about her ordeal, said, "Stephanie never got over what she went through. She suffered with terrible nightmares, great trauma. There's no doubt her efforts helped pave the way for better support for victims. She also helped raise awareness of the possible dangers faced by estate agents meeting clients alone. For her bravery and campaigning work, many people owe Stephanie a great debt of gratitude." Island showbiz journalist John Hannam, who interviewed Stephanie in 2004, said Stephanie was such a lovely young lady and her appearance on the show was inspirational. The interview is available on the Isle of Wight radio website.
She found the peace she was looking for. After the trauma she had suffered, Stephanie Slater finally found peace on the Isle of Wight. She sought refuge on the island with her friend Stacey Kettner, and the two women lived together in Ventnor, then Ryde, then Haven Street, before Stephanie's premature death. Speaking to the county press, Stacey, 49, said Stephanie loved the island and St. Catherine's Lighthouse was her spiritual home. They would drive around the coast in their 1966 VW camper van and walk their dogs, Lottie and Derek, on the beach. Steph loved the island. She felt safe here. There was so much trauma back home. She had to get away, said Stacey. Stephanie was diagnosed with cancer just 11 days before she died. She was used to living with pain, which had plagued her since killer Michael Sams manacled her inside a makeshift coffin and had not sought medical help until it became unbearable. The two women had only moved to Haven Street a year previously, where Stephanie was the happiest she had ever been. They had hoped her father, Warren, would live with them, but he died 2 weeks after they moved in. Her mother, Betty, had died 19 years ago. Housing Association officer Stacey said, she would say, "I can't believe this is our house. 25 years ago, who would have thought I would be somewhere as beautiful as this?" It had a beautiful view of the creek with trees and woodland. She thought it was paradise. She found the peace she was looking for. It was a long journey for Stephanie, who was desperate to leave Birmingham after her horrific ordeal. We weren't best friends. A lot of her close friends didn't know what to do or say, and I would visit her as I lived nearby. She kept saying, "Let's go to the Isle of Wight and be hippies." And I said, "Let's do it." It was completely spontaneous, said Stacey. She was so unwell. All those years where you go out and enjoy yourself, she missed out on that. Neither of us met anyone or had children, and we ended up in this kind of companionship like sisters. I'd had a wide circle of friends, and I did struggle at first, but we had this unique, comedic, bizarre kind of life together. We never grew up properly. We had our own in-jokes. We were always laughing together. I've reflected on it a lot over the years, that decision to move to the island, and I don't regret it. The friendship we had was so unique and epic, and we had so many adventures. Who wants an ordinary life? Stephanie's funeral will be at the Isle of Wight crematorium at noon on Thursday.
Wall work gives Lizard's home a facelift. Special features designed to benefit lizards have been added to walls in Ventnor. Island Roads upgraded the retaining wall at the terraces, also known as Judd's Walk, and installed a series of small tubes so the lizards can continue to use the wall as a habitat. Though non-native and therefore not protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981, the wall lizards who arrived on the island from the Mediterranean years ago are a celebrated addition to the town's wildlife. Island Road's site agent Malcolm Nicholson said, "Many people have come up to us and asked whether our work will affect the wall lizards. By installing the series of pipes that lead to natural voids between the wall's stonework, the lizards will continue to be able to live quite happily on and in the terraces." The approach has been approved by Appledurcombe Environmental Consultants, Eagle Eye Environmental Solutions, which is liaising with Island Roads over several projects. The work at the terraces began in July and is due to be completed later this month.
Sam's at home under the waves. A teenager who's been making waves with videos of his free diving off the coast of the Isle of Wight. Sam Hutchinson, 18, of School Green Road, Freshwater, began free diving about 6 months ago, inspired by videos he'd seen online. Free diving is when you do not use any breathing apparatus. Sam can hold his breath for 2 minutes and said he was building this up by training his body to function with higher levels of carbon dioxide. Professional free divers can hold their breath underwater for up to 20 minutes. Sam works as a trainee instructor at Adventure Activities and teaches paddleboarding and kayaking, among other water sports. He has a place in the Royal Navy to become a marine engineer starting in September 2018. In his spare time, he explores the island's waters as well as those off the coast of Cornwall. He said, "There's only a few weeks in the year where the water in the Solent is really clear enough to free dive. The clay in the water makes it quite murky. My dad is a fisherman, and so I grew up on the water. I'm excited to combine my love of water with travelling by joining the Royal Navy." To watch Sam freedive at Freshwater Bay and Allen Bay, visit http://tinyearl.com/Sam-Hutchinson.
Grandad Peter sets sail at 74. He may be 74, but that hasn't stopped Grandfather Peter Ward from sailing around Britain. After planning the trip for more than 7 years, Peter passed his RYA Yachtmaster exam and set sail on August the 11th. Skippering his 70-foot ketch, Discovery, retired double-glazing Inspector Peter of Crossfield Avenue Cowes and his 12-strong crew are due to return home on Sunday after a month at sea, battling high winds and rough seas. They prepared for the grand adventure with a voyage exploring the UK, stopping at ports including Ramsgate, Edinburgh and Belfast, learning to navigate the tides and manoeuvre the large yacht into small fishing ports. Family friend Andy Kinnaird, 37 of Binstead Road Ride, said, "At 74, Peter has more energy and enthusiasm than most guys half his age. It's an inspirational story and shows you're never too old to achieve your goals." To pass his RYA Yachtmaster and head off for a month at sea is a great achievement and an inspiration to a lot of us.
And for this week, it's goodbye from Brian.
And it's goodbye from Chris.
Good morning, this is Madeline.
And this is Sonara. And we're continuing with the letters of the County Press. And the first one, "Stop spoiling our Isle of Wight beauty spots." sent in by Yvonne Yelland of Newport. I would like to highlight a problem occurring now in Parkhurst Forest, where there have recently been incidents of fly tipping. In the past 3 weeks, there have been at least 2 incidents of fly tipping at the car park end of the forest. The latest being mattresses and concrete, not just confined to one spot. The Forestry Commission eventually has to dispose of it, and with them not being based on the island anymore, I dread to think how much it costs us, the taxpayers. The forest is classed as private land, and it is not the responsibility of the Isle of Wight Council or Island Roads to remove dumped items. Therefore, it's not included in their figures for fly tipping on the island. At the last Community Waste Forum meeting that I attended, someone asked whether fly tipping had increased, and the answer was a clear no. Surely someone must recognise the rubbish. Perhaps there is a minority of people these days who don't care about our natural environment, but many people do care passionately about our little ancient forest and would like this fly tipping to stop spoiling it for everyone.
And from Kieran Little at Whippingham, don't blame motorists. Dean Hodges, in the County Press of the 1st of September, believes someone could be seriously injured by a vehicle travelling too fast. South Street has 4 crossings within about 200 yards, and people still try and cross either when vehicles have a green light or between the crossings. Why do motorists have to have the responsibility put to them for pedestrians incorrectly crossing roads? If people used crossings properly or crossed the road after looking and listening, they wouldn't get run over. Roads are for vehicles, bikes and horses. Lowering speed limits will not stop speeding. Most people travel within speed limits. Those who do break them now will just be a higher percentage over any new limit.
And grammar can be confusing, sent by Brian Greening of Newport. In reply to George Mortimer, County Press Letters, 1st of September 17, I believe the schools in Node Hill and Sandown were once known as secondary grammar schools. Around 1950, I believe the word secondary was dropped and they became grammar schools, meaning we then had 2 grammar schools in Newport, one in Node Hill and one in Lower St James's Street, the private one. The latter became to be known as the Black and White Grammar School, as this was the colour of their school caps. The school magazine, in the article CP Weekend of the 25th of August, was for the school in Node Hill. And also attached to that, from Erica Richardson, née Day, of Cowes, my grammar. Brian Greening was right. Newport County Grammar School was at Upper St James's Street. We had to take 2 exams before going there in 1946. The private boys' school was in Lower St James's Street. Our school had a board on it, commemorating all those who died in the war.
Looking for wartime miracles, from the Reverend J. Willens in Surrey. All across our towns and cities, the blockbuster film Dunkirk is creating great interest and fascination. There is, however, one major fact not mentioned in the film. Many of those who see the film will be interested to learn the situation was actually so desperate, King George VI called for a national day of prayer on May the 26th, 1940. In a national broadcast, he asked the people of Britain to pray for God's help. Thousands of special services were held across the country, and literally millions of people poured into churches to pray. Two significant events immediately followed. Firstly, a violent storm arose over the Dunkirk region, grounding the Luftwaffe, which had been killing thousands on the beaches. Secondly, a great calm descended on the Channel, the like of which hadn't occurred for a generation, enabling the hundreds of tiny boats to rescue 338,000 soldiers rather than the estimated 30,000. It was the timing of these events immediately after the prayer day which led to people to speak of the miracle of Dunkirk, and Sunday, June the 9th, was officially appointed as a day of national thanksgiving. Looking back at this and other events, the Bishop of Chelmsford wrote, "If ever a great nation was on the point of supreme and final disaster, and yet was saved and reinstated, it was ourselves. It does not require an exceptionally religious mind to detect in all this the hand of God." At the end of 1942, after the tide had turned in the war, Churchill himself was moved to say, "I sometimes have a feeling of interference. I want to stress that I have a feeling sometimes that some guiding hand has interfered." To coincide with this film, details of various wartime miracles are being sent to thousands of churches across the UK, so as to give congregations hope and reassurance, much needed in our unsettled times. If anyone would like this information directly by email, then they are welcome to contact strengthenthefaithful@gmail.com, clearly putting wartime miracles in the subject box.
A further letter, soap operas set terrible example, from Derek Kent of Lake. It seems the so-called soaps, such as Emmerdale, Coronation Street and EastEnders, have lost all sense of normality and have become 3 crime series. Nothing but crime, fiddles and misery in abundance, each trying to outdo the other. The guilty characters go unpunished. Many stories drag on and on, sending out the message to younger viewers, you can get away with anything. There hardly ever are any happy endings, and characters such as Cain Dingle have become ridiculous, continually bashing everyone up time and time again, and always getting away with it. When we come on to the so-called comedy programme, Mrs. Brown's Boys, nothing but a lesson for younger viewers on swearing. How this passes the censor, God only knows. Bring back some normality.
Brilliant finish to carnival season. And this is from Liz Allen, Chair of Ryde Carnival Association. Thanks, Ryde. Last Saturday night, Ryde Carnival Association held its annual Illuminated Carnival. It's traditionally the end of the island's summer carnival season, and we always have great hopes for it. And it was marvellous. The weather held, the entries and performances were superb, and the crowds, well, the town did us proud. There was a huge turnout, which meant there was a fabulous atmosphere, and our volunteer collectors and marshals got a great response. We're all volunteers, by the way. It all resulted in a memorable occasion, and it felt like the town of Ryde was really proud of its own carnival. All this will help the volunteers who run it get ready for the 130th anniversary next year. We're the oldest recorded carnival in the UK, which is surely something to celebrate. We are still counting the money we collected on the night. Our buckets were very heavy, but a lot of the weight is accounted for by pennies and tuppences. So we can't tell yet how successful the event was from a financial perspective. But we are hopeful, and the co-op has extended its bucket collection at the tills for us for the whole of this week, for which we are very grateful. So thanks to all our volunteers, supporters, sponsors and friends for everything you do. We couldn't do it without you. See you next year.
And finally, the letter of the week. Good Reasons and the Real Reason, from Stacey Flanagan of Benbridge. One of your correspondents in the County Press on the 1st of September asked why the County Press had described the international GCSE as more advanced. In reply, you stated that this was because Ride School head Mark Waldron said GCSEs were not considered demanding enough for those taking A-level. Perhaps your readers would find the following comments made in this week's Sunday Times by Richard Cairns, headmaster of the highly regarded private Brighton College, somewhat enlightening. It has been an open secret for some time that it is easier for schools to secure more A-star grades by opting for international GCSE rather than GCSE. There clearly isn't a level playing field. You can't blame independent schools for playing the system. Universities have to be made aware that a top grade at GCSE is now of greater value than at international GCSE. I would also add that for some time it has been considered more likely that students will gain a C pass in English at international GCSE than at GCSE. I refer your readers to a piece written in the Telegraph on August the 21st in 2013 with the headline, "Schools Moving to Easy International GCSE Exams to Boost Grades." And of course, a higher position in league tables is then guaranteed.
And now we're looking back. And 100 years ago, on September the 8th, 1917, a public war shrine was proposed at the Yarmouth Town Trust meeting. Major C.P. Dean advocated a new public memorial to those who had lost their lives during the war. There was a plan in place to erect a memorial inside the church. However, the Major felt a memorial should be in a public place. The town committee was left to consider the proposal. And excessive potato prices made headlines this week. George Thompson, a prominent farmer, was fined £5,500 for potato profiteering. The transactions in question covered the sale of 1,320 tonnes of potatoes sold above the maximum price, with more than £4,000 illegal profit.
Moving on to 75 years ago, September the 13th, 1942, rancid butter and overpriced eggs were the topic of conversation at the Ride Control Committee. The divisional food officer wrote, they were prepared to give credit to suppliers holding a stock of bad margarine after a problem had arisen with the consumer being served rancid butter and refused a refund by the retailer. Several complaints had also been received of retailers overcharging for eggs due to a misunderstanding of the broadcast announcement. And 2 ambulance men were rewarded for their bravery during an air raid at East Cowes. Private J. Walkinshaw and Private Roy Simpson rescued a woman from beneath a collapsed building. They then tunnelled further into the debris to rescue 2 more people, one of whom was suffering from a broken neck.
And 50 years ago, on September the 9th, 1967, pressure on the county library staff was highlighted this week. A report stated more than 1 million books were issued from March 1966 to March 1967, up by 200,000 on the previous year. Librarians said there was an immense pressure to satisfy the day-to-day borrowing needs of the county, with many books being borrowed and not returned. And a swan caused a power failure in Shanklin and Ventnor. The Swan was seen flying into overhead cables at Lake Marsh near the waterworks, causing lights to go out for 40 minutes. Severe gales caused further problems across the island, with several other power failures.
25 years ago, on September the 11th, 1992, there was anger over the publicity for the sensational new dinosaur find discovered on the island. The chairman of the Island Conservation Society said the county leader should not have gone public with the discovery of a sauropod dinosaur, hailed the most important find of its kind in Europe before the site had been fully excavated. And there was an unusual sight on Yaverland Beach, with 3 circus elephants taking their daily stroll. When Jerry Cottle's circus was in town, the elephants took a daily swim and walk along the beach. However, the dung left behind began causing problems for residents, so trainer Marcel Peters had to resort to walking behind them with a wheelbarrow.
And 10 years ago, on September the 7th, 2007, the island has always been famous for its carnivals, but 10 years ago work began on a new centre which would help to cement the island's reputation as the carnival capital of England. The Carnival Learning Centre was built on the site of a former nightclub, restaurant and one-time civic pool at Ryde, which is home to the world's oldest carnival. Builders began work in mid-August, and new bus times angered braiding mothers. The changes to the bus timetable meant children as young as 9 faced a 90-minute journey into school each morning, leaving as early as 7:34 a.m. Parents questioned the safety of the new timetables that could leave children stranded at bus stations for hours. And club boss turned midwife Mark Watson had an exciting evening when he successfully delivered an employee's baby at 5 a.m. Troy Griffin worked at Mark's nightclub, Colonel Bogey's, in Sandown, and called Mark in a panic when his wife Helen went into labour. Mark decided to go and wait with the couple, but ended up helping to deliver the baby.
And moving on to Wight memories. Tank named after Mayoress. There was a First World War tank at Ryde Canoe Lake. Ryde's tank saga has rumbled on to a conclusion thanks to keen historian Tony Gale and Mayor Councillor Henry Adams. A fortnight ago, it was Henry's 70th birthday, and among the presents was the book Ryde Postcards by Lynette Archer and John Woodford. There, on page 31, was yet another postcard of the tank, but with a descriptive caption which gave a clue as to the tank's name. The smaller version of the First World War tank was traditionally given a feminine name, but the name of Ryde's great monolith, which was cut up to support the Second World War effort, was obscured by the mists of time. Light was shone by the caption, "The First World War tank in the grounds of Ryde Canoe Lake was presented to the people of Ryde in recognition of having raised £500,000 for the war effort. It was named Louise, after the Mayoress, Miss S.L. Barton." Toby contacted Anne Barrett, the researcher for the Ryde Social Heritage Group, who produced a copy of the obituary for Alderman John I. Barton from the Isle of Wight Times of October 28, 1920. He had been elected mayor in 1913 and served throughout the war until November 1919. Miss Selina Louise Barton, his sister, acted as his mayoress. It was a reasonable assumption if the tank was named Louise, it would have arrived before November 1919, Tony said. Another suggestion was that the tank was named Ethel, but Tony said, "I am almost certain it was one of Ryde's fire engines that was named Ethel."
And some more Wight memories. Wartime offer of chocolate comes full circle 74 years later. 5-year-old Therese Robert had been told never to accept sweets from strange men, and Dan Lyons was no exception to that rule. The young Lyons had parachuted into Normandy behind enemy lines as part of the invasion force. The 19-year-old signalman landed close to the village of Le Bar de Ranville soon after 1 a.m. on June the 6th, 1944. But it was not until the breaking dawn that Dan and his fellow paras and infantrymen made their way into the village. There they discovered in the Roberts' farmhouse a serviceman injured in the drop, receiving first aid on the kitchen table. Dan was a radio operator in the 6th Airborne Signals and had to get to headquarters, so he left, but on his way out he offered the 5-year-old some chocolate. It was refused, as she was told not to accept anything from men in uniform, because they were bound to be Germans. The tale intrigued the family, and 4 years ago, Dan's son-in-law, Terry Glynn, made inquiries with the 6th Airborne in an attempt to locate anyone connected with the story. It was not until last year Terry had an email from the daughter of the little girl who had refused the chocolate. Natalie Monsaint had decided to research the story she had been told. It was Natalie who organised a trip for her and her 7 relatives, including her mother and her uncle, who was there on that morning and helped the invasion force.
So, 74 years later, Therese, now approaching 80, and with the married name Monsaint, brought chocolate to Dan from the other side of the English Channel. It was the little girl's 14-year-old brother, Pierre Robert, along with his grandfather, who had the harrowing experience of carrying the bodies of German and British soldiers to the local cemetery before the family were evacuated to safer territory near Bayeux. Day went on to become a sergeant and play a vital communications role in the Battle of Pegasus Bridge and the Battle of the Bulge, and he saw active service in other theatres of war, including Palestine. After the war, he finally settled on the island with his wife and family, where he put down deep roots. At Le Bar de Ranville, a weathered marble plaque was erected in remembrance of the soldiers who gave their lives and the band of brothers who risked theirs to liberate France. A plaque on the wall of the now disused farmhouse commemorates the fact that it was the first building liberated from the Germans. Following the two families' emotional get-together at the church hall of St. Thomas of Canterbury, Cowes, plans are afoot to take Dan back to Le Bar de Ranville, where the mayor has arranged for the farmhouse to be specially opened. Terry said, "There were so many pieces of information that my father-in-law has never mentioned about his experiences that have come to light through this. All he told us was he jumped out of a plane, landed, and was a wireless operator." Dan said, "I was really overwhelmed by the whole meeting."
And from Matthew Chatfield, who is responsible for wild animals? Back when I worked for the Isle of Wight Council's countryside section, my job had the built-in advantage that most people I came into contact with were understandably happy with the island's lovely landscape. But there was one particular sort of inquiry which went a bit different. People sometimes seem to imagine that I had the Doolittle-like power to calm the savage beast, or at least poison the savage caterpillar. Of course, I did not. A typical case one summer was the irate lady who rang up because moles were digging up her path. What would the council do about it? Why, nothing, madam. The moles are free to dig up whatever they like. And yes, even if you've paid your rates, the council still doesn't have any magical mole-scaring teams to send round to you. Moles, as any greenkeeper knows, are just a fact of life. It is possible to dissuade them if you're keen on a perfect lawn, but if you take that course, it's going to be just you versus the moles. The council isn't going to join in on either side, because the council is not responsible for the moles any more than anyone else is. Moles are just moles, and they answer to nobody. Another case I got involved with concerned some rooks in a spinney of trees. The rooks, as rooks will, made a row every evening, threw twigs and bark around, and acted like a crowd of annoying, beady-eyed hooligans. A small posse of outraged homeowners made representations to the local authority. The trees, they claimed, were in public ownership, and therefore the rooks were acting on behalf of the council. Neatness and order was imperilled by these rampaging corvids. It took me some time to get these poor souls to appreciate the rooks were acting not in accordance with the Isle of Wight Council Manual of Approved Rook Behaviour, but on some frolic of their own. And had the council taken the decision to intervene, the rooks would likely have been indifferent to measures to calm them down. Bird ASBOs would have been futile, and some of them probably had tags around their ankles already. Short of felling the trees, there was nothing to be done but enjoy the rookery antics until the birds took themselves off somewhere else, which of course they inevitably did. It seems a bit sad we're so divorced from the world of wild creatures. We too easily forget that they exist in their own right. It is so hard to appreciate that a badger digging up your fence might simply want to do so. It doesn't care about you, it's just living the life of a badger. So efforts to obtain compensation or control measures won't work, no matter how much you whinge, unless you do find some way to communicate with the animals themselves. Then you'd probably hear them moan about us.
And from Jake Harrison, why I love visiting Isle of Wight charity shops. The modest charity shop is thriving and succeeding where other high street retailers have failed. And with a steady rise in voluntary organisations popping up everywhere on island high streets, second-hand shopping has never been more popular. Charity shops, a healthy reminder it is better to give than to receive. Self-conscious shops tucked away on back streets. Small scale, staffed with big hearts. Simple. So what's happened? Where has all of the confidence suddenly come from? Why are there at least 3 or 4 charity shops on the corner of every island town's high street these days? The reason that I'm interested is because one of my newest hobbies involves spending an hour or two mooching around town on a Saturday morning shopping for bargains. Now, while that sentence makes me sound like a 30-something-year-old midweek mum with too much of time on her hands, I ask you all to bear with me. You see, I have become an avid fan of charity shop shopping. I recently purchased a Ted Baker jacket for £14, a Hugo Boss shirt for £3, and a Salt Rock polo top for £2, all of which were from 3 different Newport charity shops. Yes, these items are a few years old and have been worn by God knows who, and at one point probably had everything from stale beer to yesterday's kebab sauce all spilled down them. But the quality and durability is still there. The fit remains true to the label, and the classic brand name still shines through. All for less than £20. Bargain. So why are so many of us now opting to shop at charity shops? Because we, the public, are growing tired of the inflated retail prices and are just as happy to stumble upon a better quality bargain for a third of the price. That's why. You see, in the past, charity shops were looked down upon and considered a poor people-only place and a dumping ground for second-hand rubbish and discarded furniture. The sort of place you went to get rid of all your used Stephen King novels and your outdated M&S shirts. But today, vintage is back in fashion, and more thrifty islanders are moving away from current fashion trend retail outlets, preferring to go the retro way, all the while donating to good causes. From the RSPCA and the Salvation Army to the Mountbatten Hospice, there are plenty of shops to visit, and most are even open on Saturdays. You can find everything from clothes, games, instruments, furniture, antiques, collectibles, and just about everything else you could think of. The staff are always very friendly, helpful, and very grateful for your help and support. I truly believe, with a high street shift to the online market, charity shops will forever remain present, noble to their cause, and will grow more popular as we head into financially tough times. With the rising pressure to tighten our belts and the cost of living rising faster than ever, there's never been a better time to think of brilliant ways to save a few pennies. They're also environmentally friendly. Saving money for better quality? Now that's smart thinking. So head down to your nearest charity shop today and stock up on a few bargains. Trust me, you'll soon find yourself not only digging out a few surprises, but also making a difference to somebody's life. It's truly win-win for everybody. And after all, charitable giving benefits the giver more than the receiver.
And now behind the news. When the circus comes to town. When you think about summer on the Isle of Wight, you conjure up thoughts of sandy beaches, floods of tourists, and, undeniably, a trip to J. Miller's circus. It's just not right if you haven't taken your seat inside the big top and filled up on candy floss and popcorn, while staring wide-eyed at the performers in the ring. The beauty of J. Miller's circus is the show is different year after year. The talented group of artists come back every summer with something new and exciting. And that's why, 30 years down the line, the circus is still coming to town. J. Miller's Circus was born in 1987, when John and Liz Miller decided to turn dreams of their own show into a reality. Their careers began at the age of just 14, when they both left school to join the circus. Like anything else, the years have been full of highs and lows. There has been enough controversy to fill the pages of the county press, but there has been an overwhelming demand for the twice-daily show, which is packed full of acrobats, juggling acts, unicyclists, illusionists, tightrope walkers, and everyone's favourite, Peppy the Clown. Only last month the circus made headlines in the county press when Wheel of Death performer Thomas Sulsky was hospitalised with pneumonia. J. Miller's faced noise complaints from residents in 1988 when it first arrived on the island. It suffered during 2001's foot and mouth disease, which left the crew with nowhere to set up, and the show made national headlines when an elderly grandmother complained about its dancing polar bear, which turned out to be a man in a costume. The circus travels around 2,000 miles each year, visiting around 35 towns during its 34-week tour. Once on location, the big top is assembled and ready to go in just under 4 hours. In the past, it has taken a record time of just 50 minutes from the moment the circus performs its last show until all the vehicles leave the site, travelling together in a convoy. The children of owners, John and Liz, have attended schools all over the UK, with the current record standing at 32 schools in just 1 year. Daughters Charlotte, Jodie and Paige, and son John Jr. or JJ, have managed to study alongside their demanding circus lifestyles. Youngest daughter Paige picked up her GCSE results last month and is set to follow in the footsteps of her older sisters. But life on the road is nothing out of the ordinary for the Miller children, who were all born while travelling with the circus. In fact, John Jr. was very nearly born an islander, as he arrived just 3 days after J. Miller's circus left the Isle of Wight in 2004. Until 1997, J. Miller's had a number of animals in the circus lineup, including bears, snakes, lions, camels and a selection of exotic animals. Use of animals had been a worldwide circus tradition since the 18th century. Circus bear Yogi was rejected by his mother as a cub and was subsequently hand-reared by John Miller. Now 32 years old and living in a sanctuary in Canada, Yogi has by far outlived his expected lifespan and has not forgotten his old friend John, who he recognised during a visit in 2002. All of J. Miller's sensitively handled stars were well cared for, but the Millers made the decision not to continue adding them to the show in 1998 due to political pressure which was affecting trade. The Big Top was previously situated in other locations around the island, including the Stroud Field Freshwater and the county's showground Northwood, before the outbreak of foot and mouth in 2001 forced the owners to find a different location.
When J. Miller's finally found its new home next to the racecourse roundabout, it wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms by its neighbours. As soon as the circus arrived on site, it sparked outrage from funeral directors using the Isle of Wight crematorium, who described its position as insensitive and distasteful. Ward councillor at the time, Barry Abraham, said, "To get carloads of excited and happy children making their way to the circus using the same lane as funeral processions is totally inappropriate." A much healthier relationship between the two sites built slowly over the years, and J. Miller's Circus has now been comfortably settled into its location for 16 very successful seasons. The Isle of Wight has a special place, not just in my heart, but in the hearts of all the team at J. Miller's, said John. We always want to put on a great show for islanders whenever we visit. When Thomas Salsky was hospitalised with pneumonia, leaving the show without its headline act, we received nothing but love and support from the people of the island. J. Miller's artistes have spread love and laughter beyond the Big Top over the years too. Peppy and friends have visited patients at St. Mary's Hospital to raise a smile with a little clowning around. And they've been involved in many charity efforts, including the opening of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Air Ambulance clothing banks and raising funds for cancer research. In the winter months, the circus begins planning for next year's show, carefully selecting performers from around the world, with many hundreds of videos flooding in to demonstrate their skills. Costumes are tailored, production is planned, and all equipment is repainted and wires replaced. Everything you see in the circus is manufactured and maintained by the team at J. Miller's. They work hard behind the scenes to bring you the show which you come to see every summer. As an avid circus lover, I was always going to take my children over to Whippingham to see what was in store for us this year. I didn't need to tell them when the circus arrived in town. They'd watched with anticipation as the posters went up around the island, and then squealed with delight at the first sighting of the striking red and blue tent, which appeared as if by magic. We took our seats inside the big top, surrounded by the buzz of circus atmosphere and the smell of sawdust. We watched with amazement as one act after another was every bit as good as we had anticipated. I'm sure I wasn't the only person who took a sharp intake of breath when the Salvadors reached dizzying heights in their Rolling Globe act, or during the, watch through your fingers, Wheel of Death. Beauty and the Beast fans loved this year's theme, which had every little girl frozen to the spot, including my own, who hasn't stopped talking about it since. Just like any fairy tale, there was a happy ending to 2017's show, which finished for the year last Sunday. Just like many islanders, I'm already looking forward to next year.
And now for some of the things that are happening on the island. Double birthday celebration for Hospice and Shanklin Chine. 2 special birthdays will be celebrated with an evening of music in the magical setting of Shanklin Chine on Saturday, September the 16th. Music in the Chine marks the 200th anniversary of the longest established attraction on the Isle of Wight and the 35th anniversary of Earl Mountbatten Hospice. The 2 organisations have come together for the event, which will feature the Earl Mountbatten Community Choir and guests singing and playing in the captivating environment. The historic gorge opened in 1817 and has since enticed millions of visitors to wander through and marvel at its natural beauty. The hospice was officially opened by the Duchess of Kent on October the 13th, 1982, and has since cared for thousands of islanders and their families at the most challenging of times. Darren Cool, Shanklin Chine marketing manager, said, "We are really looking forward to working with the hospice on this very special birthday event. It's a local charity dear to all our hearts, so we hope many people will come and support the event on what promises to be a magical evening." Music in the Chine starts at 5 p.m. and the entry fee is £4.50 for adults and £2.80 for children, with 50% donated to Earl Mountbatten Hospice. So you can see more details on www.isleofwighthospice.org or phone Shanklin Chine on 866 432.
Shipwreck and Rocky Marriage in New Play. A new play premieres at Key Arts next week to tie in with the Maritime exhibition. Staged in the Round next Friday, September the 15th, by Origins Theatre, the rehearsed reading of The Souvenir featured 2 new songs written by John Hacker. The play is based on a shipwreck in 1916, in which the captain stayed on board, although his crew were heroically rescued by Brooke lifeboat. The events are viewed in flashback a century later against the backdrop of a marriage on the rocks. Kevin Wilson of Origins said, "It's all about deciding who is a hero and who is a martyr." The story of The Souvenir is fascinating, and it was a challenge to bring those events to life. The music and words work well together, and we cannot wait to perform it in the Round. It will be very informal and a very special night. The Souvenir is on for one night only. More details and booking at keyarts.org.
And A Tale of Love and Politics, an impressive cast and orchestra will take to the stage at Shanklin Theatre when the Russian State Opera visits. The new production of Tosca, a melodrama where love and politics collide, will feature more than 30 musicians. Originally set in Rome in the 1800s, it tells the story of 2 idealistic lovers, Tosca and Cavaradossi. Their trust is set to be tested by Scarpia, the ruthless police officer who knows no boundaries. Scarpia has sentenced Kavaradasi to death, but the officer is prepared to let Kavaradasi go if Tosca is willing to spend the night with Scarpia. It comes to Shanklin Theatre next Friday, September the 15th. And that's all that we have for today. So it's goodbye from Madeline.
And goodbye from Sonara.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, why the music was great, but a visit to the Proms last weekend brought disappointment to many visually impaired concert goers. And the best and the worst about going on holiday.
The constant refrain of, "Ooh, look at this," and "Ah, isn't that beautiful?" does get irritating when you can't see the objects being ogled.
But first, there's a new version out of a document known as your CVI, or your Certificate of Vision Impairment. Sounds dry as dust, doesn't it? But it can actually end up being one of the most important bits of paper in your life. It has to be signed by your eye doctor, and it sets out the extent of your sight loss. And that in turn can decide what disability benefits you get and what services you receive from your local authority. Things like care in the home, rehabilitation and help to learn new ways of doing things. The previous CVI was thought by many not to be up to the job now, and that many people who ought to be registered, either as visually impaired or severely visually impaired, were just falling through the net. Cathy Yelf, CEO of the Macular Society, which represents thousands of visually impaired people, has been telling me more about what this could mean for her members.
Well, what we hope will be the benefit and the advantages of the new one is that it's easier to fill in, and so it makes healthcare professionals, particularly ophthalmologists, more inclined to mention certification to blind and partially sighted people, because that's how it has to be done. It has to be done by an ophthalmologist, and in very, very busy clinics, I think it's possible that this has been squeezed out rather too often in the past. So I think it's hoped that a simplified form will make more people have access to certification.
You say access to certification, so do you think there are some people who just don't even know that there is a certificate and something to be registered for?
Yes, I think that happens in very many cases, and of course particularly in age-related macular degeneration, because most people with, say, dry age-related macular degeneration for whom there is no treatment available in hospitals, increasingly nowadays never get to see, or very rarely get to see, an ophthalmologist. And it could be that a lot of people with dry AMD are being lost in the system. So the people with wet AMD who have injections at hospital will be very close to the ophthalmologist and the eye clinic staff. And it may be that for those people, an offer of certification happens as part of the normal routine care. The real concern is for the people who have dry AMD, who very irregularly or never go to an eye clinic. And those people may not be offered and may not think to ask to be certified as visually impaired.
And if they're not certified, what's the significance of that?
Well, there are many significant issues really around this. The first is that certification triggers something with your local authority. So this is a two-stage process. An eye hospital doctor has to certify a person as having a visual impairment that's irreversible, and that then should trigger a registration of that person with the local authority, and the local authority is then duty bound to offer that visually impaired person an assessment of their needs. So it may be of benefit to people who would otherwise go unnoticed by their local authority, and so that may give them access to support and care they wouldn't otherwise have. But of course there are wider benefits as well. Actually, the individual may also then qualify for a certain number of benefits. So, for example, disabled parking and certain other benefits may be triggered by certification. But there are wider societal benefits to this as well. So the certification data is these are the only data that the government uses to make a judgment on whether it's doing well looking after blind and partially sighted people. And so it is really important that these data are as complete as they can possibly be, because otherwise the government is underestimating the needs of blind and partially sighted people. And then, of course, a lot of the data is very useful in terms of research purposes and in designing care and support for people with visual impairment. So there are many, many reasons why this is really important data.
And just to put a bit of numerical flesh on those bones, I mean, I think the number of people registering under the previous CVI is somewhere around 23,000 people. How do you think that compares with the number of people who should be eligible to qualify? Because I can remember the Macular Society saying quite a long time ago that the numbers were much higher than that for their condition alone.
Well, we suspect that that's the case. Of course, a lot of people with macular degeneration, in fact, a lot of people with visual impairment, will not have a visual impairment that is sufficiently severe to qualify for registration. So there is a whole group of maybe hundreds of thousands of people who have a visual impairment, but it is not significant enough to qualify as for registration. So that may be where a lot of these people are. But we are absolutely certain that across the spectrum, and certainly critically in this dry AMD population, there will be many people who do qualify for registration who are not registered, who are not certified.
You've said people maybe aren't registering because they're not even being told it's possible, but are there other reasons why people don't really like the idea of registering?
Well, we only really know this anecdotally, so I'm not sure that there's any actually firm evidence of this, but anecdotally we think that perhaps there is still a stigma attached to a certification as a, in inverted commas, disabled person, and that many people who are worried about their sight are trying to stave off that definition of themselves as long as they possibly can.
So that almost by mentioning it and giving it a name, that makes it feel more real, as it were?
It may be that. Anecdotally, we hear that occasionally, that people simply aren't ready to accept that that's where they are in their sight loss journey, and they may put that off for that reason. And it may be simply a question of pride, that people, aren't interested in the benefits. They don't want to take advantage of that. They're independent-minded and independent in the way they want to live their lives, and they're not interested in going down something that they might feel is a sort of dependency route, if you like. So there may be reasons why people just don't want to do that. And of course, it's absolutely within their rights to do that. There's no compulsion. People don't have to be registered at all, and it would be quite wrong if people were compelled to be registered. But there are advantages, and we do want people to know and be aware of those advantages so that they're not missing out on something that could actually be very useful to them.
Of course, with the problems being quoted every week about the difficulties of providing social care, both through the government and local authorities, can the system cope with this increased demand? If people more register, can we be certain that people will get these benefits?
Well, that is a very fair question, and we are currently firefighting in a number of places around the country where we are aware of low vision services being withdrawn because contracts are not being renewed and clinical commissioning groups are no longer prepared to fund these services. So that is a very significant and growing issue. And we have heard historically in the past of cases of people where the certification element of this two-stage process has happened, but then there's an enormously long delay before the local authority gets around to actually the registration, which is what triggers the next stage of support and help and so on. So there are many ways in which this can be suboptimal, if you like, but certainly it can never happen at all if the patient is not aware of it and can't ask for it.
One other thing, which is other people now being involved in the registration. How significant is that? Because there was a time when it was sort of almost the fiefdom of the ophthalmologist, wasn't there?
Yes, well, we welcome the idea of other people being involved because I think there aren't enough ophthalmologists to go around to treat people, and it makes perfect sense, I think, that other people should be able to complete the forms. And I think, often lots of eye clinic staff do get involved in the completion of the form. The trouble is it does need a firm diagnosis from a qualified person to say what the person's visual condition is, what their diagnosis is, and whether or not this is a permanent condition for them.
So what advice do you give to your members? I guess quite a lot of them come to you perhaps almost beyond that point, or maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm just wondering what you, as an organisation, what you say to people.
Well, what we say is that if people feel that their sight is dropping, they should ask about certification if they think that they may be approaching that threshold. I think it's very important for the patients who are not going and being seen regularly in eye clinics, that they still go and have regular appointments with their optometrist, their high street optician. There are lots of reasons why people with macular degeneration, for example, should still see their high street optometrist, because they may have other eye conditions, they may have short-sightedness or long-sightedness, all kinds of other things that optometrists can help with optimising the vision vision that they do have. And those optometrists should be able to identify when somebody is approaching that threshold for certification and refer them then into the hospital doctor for that to happen. So regular eye tests, just as you would if you didn't have macular degeneration, at your local optometrist is a very important part of your overall eye health care, and will make sure that you do get referred to the right person if you are registrable at that stage.
Cathy Yelf, CEO of the Macular Society. Now, last Saturday night should have been a great one for music lover David Small. David was seated in a box at London's Royal Albert Hall, but he knew what many people who shared the box with him didn't, that this could be for the last time.
The RNIB has had a box at the Royal Albert Hall since 1929. It was bequeathed to them obviously by someone who's very wealthy. The boxes at the Albert Hall are in perpetuity until someone decides that they want to sell them. They do command very high prices when they come on the market. Anyway, that's been in the gift of the RNIB for the sole use of partially sighted and blind service users of the RNIB. And it's been a marvellous service for me. I mean, I lost my sight in 1998. I didn't know about it for a while because it's never been widely publicised until lately. And it gives you the opportunity to enjoy, especially the BBC programmes which are on at the moment, in comfort. And also, besides the music, there's a social side to it. You meet people from all over the place who come to London to use the box.
So what's now happened about the box then?
Well, now what's happened now is that I put in a request for a concert at the end of September, and on Thursday I had an email from the Music Advisory Service to say that the trustees have decided to sell the box. Nothing about, consultation with membership or anything else, and that they were in discussions with the Royal Albert Hall to try and do a deal for tickets in the auditorium for 10 years. Well, there's a problem with the seats in the auditorium. They're a lot more expensive than the box. The box is subsidised, so per seat you pay £16. But I mean, lots of the concerts in the Royal Albert Hall, I mean, they can be as much as £98. And even if you get, two half price, you're still paying £49 a seat. And for a lot of blind people, that's a lot of money. And I think music is so important for blind people. It has been for me. When I lost my sight, the one thing I still could cling on to was music. And I've been to concerts which I wouldn't normally go to, and I've really enjoyed them, because the box has been available.
Has there been any warning of this?
No, none at all. This email on Thursday, and it wasn't really about that. It was, it was telling me that my request had been rejected and that they were going to sell it. And on Saturday night, I went to a prom, and the other people in the box had not heard about this. They've been using the box on and off over the years, and they were absolutely disgusted by the fact that no one had been told.
Have you had any explanation for our RNIB?
Well, they want to use it for other services, they say. But what worries me about that is when they say they're going to use it for other services, it just goes into the coffers, and who knows what happens to that money. And they will raise quite a bit of money because those boxes are quite valuable. And I say, well, why can't that money be hypothecated to, music? Because they do spend so little time on music, and it's so important. The prom on Saturday night was really wonderful because it was the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra from Amsterdam, and they had a concert of Haydn and Mahler symphonies, which, the audience was just ecstatic at the end. It was a wonderful experience. I would like it to continue. If they can't afford the administration with a paid administrator, there must be someone who's semi-retired, retired, who would like to take on that role. That's one way around it, I would have thought.
David Small, Well, we have heard from other people too about this, including John Savage. He says he was annoyed and upset in equal measure to hear about the RNIB's plans to sell their Albert Hall box. We did invite the RNIB onto the programme to talk about this. They opted to send us a statement. They say, "We've made a decision to sell RNIB's box at the Royal Albert Hall to enable investment in other areas of our vital work, supporting blind and partially sighted people. As a venue, the Royal Albert Hall already offers a limited number of 2 for the price of 1 tickets for people with disabilities, offering continued access to events. We are working directly with the Royal Albert Hall on a new scheme for RNIB customers, which we'll introduce in the new year. And we will, of course, keep an eye on that story." Now, got a late holiday planned? Well, if so, you could do worse than take a few tips from Red Sail.
Going away on holiday can be a mixed blessing when you're blind. Sure, it's great to escape the daily grind of work and chores for a week or two, but I seldom find it relaxing. At home, I'm on familiar territory. I know where everything is, and if I want to go out to the shops or the climbing wall, I can do so independently. But on holiday, I'm always reliant on someone else. Whether it's finding the coffee, working the microwave, or being escorted everywhere in case I get lost, the lack of independence is dispiriting. And then there's sightseeing. I know it goes with the discovering new territory part of the holiday, and I don't expect anyone to forgo the pleasure on my account, but the constant refrain of, "Ooh, look at this," and "Ah, isn't that beautiful," does get irritating when you can't see the objects being ogled. So I'll often stay behind and listen to an audiobook instead, which is okay, but all rest and no play makes me intolerable. I need my daily dose of exercise, and if I don't get it, I go stir crazy. So thank goodness for the Isle of Wight. With its own association for the blind, it's an island that takes accessibility seriously, which means that there are loads of activities to keep me busy. Unfortunately, climbing the Needles isn't on the agenda, at least not on my family holiday. The aim is to find something that we can all enjoy doing together. This year, our 8th, Kate, the kids and I went off the beaten track and explored the island on bikes. Thanks to a wonderful charity called Charlotte's Tandems, we had free use of a bicycle made for 2, and with Kate steering and me pedalling hard behind, the kids quickly discovered that their parents aren't so decrepit after all. A few days later, we were riding the waves, with me and an instructor in a 2-man kayak and Kate and the kids in singles. We were all able to enjoy paddling at our own pace. After all that fresh air and fun, I was quite happy to stay behind and do my own thing when the others did go sightseeing, and we all returned to London relaxed, refreshed, and without feeling that my blindness had been an issue at all. So, no points for guessing our holiday destination next year.
Red Sail. And then, of course, there's the issue when you go with someone of how to release them from the bondage of being your guide. They're on holiday too, after all. And that's the thing about personal columns, they always start you off with a train of thought of your own. Well, we'd like more of them on In Touch. We've also noticed that the last few have all come from men. We'd like some columns from women, please. And if reading them from braille or print on the air is a problem, we're very happy to discuss ways round that. And that's it for today. Do let us have your comments and your views. You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk or click on the Contact Us link from our website. That's www.bbc.co.uk/intouch, where you can also get more information about the programme and you can sign up for our podcast. From me, Peter Wight, producer, the returning Cheryl Gabriel, and the team, goodbye.
This is Chris.
And this is Pauline.
Reading out the questions for the client consultation survey. This is advanced information. in order to give you more time to consider your responses. Client consultation. Established in 1895, the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind, IWSB, is one of the oldest independent charities on the Isle of Wight. We are inviting clients and prospective clients to have their say and identify their priorities in a consultation exercise that will help determine Isle of Wight Society for the Blind future plans and activities. Our continuing purpose is to provide practical, emotional and educational support for visually impaired people, their families and carers, and promote awareness of the needs of those affected by sight loss amongst the general public.
We strive to help people maintain independence, learn new skills and participate in social, physical and educational activities to reduce loneliness and isolation. Currently, we organise weekly coffee mornings, educational talks and seminars, craft clubs, weekly swimming sessions, walking and golf, a visiting and befriending service, a weekly audio version of the Isle of Wight County Press, and a library of audio books. To help ensure the services we provide in the future meet the needs of our existing and potential clients, the Society will use the survey to guide and develop our strategic plans. With your help, we can ensure that our resources are targeted wisely to meet your needs. Thank you very much for participating in this survey. Your feedback is invaluable in guiding our future.
Do you currently use any of the services supported by the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind? Your answer is either yes or no.
If you answered no, please go to question 3. If you answered yes, please rate how positive each have on your well-being under the following. And the headings are not applicable, not at all, slightly positive, moderately positive, very positive, extremely positive. This is Strollers Walking Group, Dolphin Swimming Group, Millbrook House Weekly Coffee Morning,
Bembridge Monthly Coffee Morning,
Knighton Monthly Coffee Morning,
Freshwater Monthly Coffee Morning,
Owls, Millbrook House, meeting with guest speaker,
Knitters and Natterers Social Group at Millbrook House,
Striders Walking Group,
Talking News,
Audio Library,
Newsletter,
Millbrook House Resource Room of Aids and Equipment for the Visually Impaired,
Millbrook House Braille Document Production,
Millbrook House as a point of contact for information for the visually impaired,
Isle of Wight Society for the Blind Volunteer Home Visit Service,
opportunities to volunteer for IWSB,
the Golf Group
and the Tenpin Bowling Group. Please rate how positive an impact the following services might have on your well-being if IWSB were able to coordinate them for clients. As with our existing provision, the Society covers any general administrative, organisational costs and room use at Millbrook House. Categories are, and we'd like you to say not at all, or slightly positive, moderately positive, very positive, extremely positive. Age-appropriate exercise classes such as yoga.
Other sport or activity taster days.
Support to participate in a sponsored challenge event, e.g. the Isle of Wight Cycle Challenge, walk, run, marathon, skydive, etc., to raise awareness and funds for the Society.
Craft taster sessions.
Monthly food and drink tasting group with sessions at Millbrook House.
Monthly food and drink tasting group with sessions at other venues.
Quarterly day trips to Isle of Wight heritage sites or tourist attractions.
Quarterly day trips to the mainland heritage sites or tourist attractions.
Holidays and short breaks organised by the Society, supported with the provision of sighted volunteers to assist with guiding, not care provision.
Monthly music group to include singing, listening, and occasional concert or live performance visits.
Quarterly storytelling or poetry recital group, your chance to spin a good yarn or share favourite poems.
Social activities closer to your home.
Introduction to Technology course of perhaps 6 weekly sessions looking at computers, iPads, mobile phones and apps for the visually impaired.
Monthly technology group to keep abreast of development in computers, iPads, mobile phones and apps for the visually impaired.
Quarterly technology group to keep abreast of development in computers, iPads, mobile phones and apps for the visually impaired.
Evening/weekend social group for 65 plus year olds.
Evening, weekend social group for 50 to 64 year olds.
Evening, weekend social group for 36 to 49 year olds.
Evening, weekend social group for 19 to 35 year olds.
Evening social activities for young people aged 16 to 18 years.
Evening social club for 11 to 15 year olds.
Evening social club for 7 to 10 year olds.
Quarterly evening social meeting at Millbrook House for parents, guardians, carers of young people with visual impairment, with separate activities arranged for any accompanying young people.
School summer holiday activities or social event for visually impaired young people and their parents, guardians or carers.
Dancing.
Please add any further suggestions of services or activities you would like the Society to provide.
Other suggestions. Please suggest any sport or activities you would like to try. Please identify the challenge event or activity you would be interested in. Please suggest any craft activities you would like to try. Please indicate here the styles of music you would enjoy.
In relation to social and recreational activities, please indicate whether you would generally prefer activities targeted and arranged specifically for those with visual impairment, or activities that are open to both sighted and visually impaired people where reasonable adjustments are made to accommodate the particular needs of the visually impaired.
Visual impairment aside, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is very healthy, how healthy do you feel at the moment?
Being connected is more than having a network of friends and family. It could include being connected to your community, having the ability to access services or help when you need it, and being digitally connected. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is very connected, how connected to others do you feel?
On a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is very confident, how confident are you using technology, the internet in everyday life? For example, using email, the internet, social media, online banking, shopping, etc.
How do you find out about the following? The headings are printed leaflets or posters, word of mouth, Isle of Wight Society for the Blind website, other internet, social media, radio, talking news, or other, and then please specify. Local events, social activities. Contact details for organisations and services for the visually impaired. Health information relating to sight loss. Other health services and information. And travel.
About Isle of Wight Society for the Blind. What, if anything, do you know about Isle of Wight Society for the Blind? How would you describe Isle of Wight Society for the Blind to others?
Would you favour a name change of the Society to promote a more inclusive organisation that supported those with visual impairment? For example, Isle of Wight Vision. Your answer is yes or no.
Would you like to suggest a new working name for the Society that would reflect a more inclusive and forward-looking ethos? Please remember that this survey and all responses are completely anonymous. Information gathered is purely to enable us to better understand the needs of visually impaired islanders to inform our future plans and services.
Please indicate which age range you are in. Under 10 years, 11 to 15 years, 16 to 18 years, 19 to 35 years, 36 to 49 years, 50 to 64 years, 65 to 74 years, 75 to 84 years, 85 plus years, or you've the option prefer not to say.
What is your gender?
What is your current status? Please tick all that apply. Are you a full-time student of any age? A part-time student of any age? Employed? Homemaker? Unemployed? Semi-retired? Or retired?
Do you volunteer for any organisation? Yes? No? Prefer not to say? If yes, which organisation?
Please tell us the first part, that is the 4 digits, of your postcode.
Please let us have any comments, questions or concerns.
Please identify if you have completed this and independently, firstly as a visually impaired client or prospective client, or as a volunteer, carer, guardian or visually impaired parent.
Thank you for completing this survey.